Hey, it's Tapping Airlines Math Industry, and we are going to learn about the inverse element of addition and absorbing elements of multiplication. So in algebra, you'll be using a lot of variables, and you'll be using a ton of parentheses and numbers and constants. So to begin off, let's do something easy and work ourselves to what we're learning about. So, when you add 1 plus 2, it should equal 3, which you probably learned in your elementary school years. The other part is, what if we say 1 times 6? 1 times 6 would equal 6, also from your elementary years. But what happens if you do 0 times 6? If you ever learned this in middle school, many people say it's 6 because if I'm multiplying by a number by 0, then I still get that number. That's false. It's 0. Every time you multiply by 0, it's going to be 0. Because when you multiply nothing, nothing happens. So basically, when people do these kind of problems on fact fluencies, the most common answers are usually the ones with the zeros, because they think it's the number by itself, but it will always equal 0. Not only that, imagine if we have 3 plus 3. That will equal 6. But imagine if I have negative 3 plus 3. That will equal 0, because on the number line back in elementary school, if you go from negative 3 and go forward 3, you'll get to 0. So, when you're doing these kinds of problems, it will help you understand what we're learning about today. So the first thing we're going to learn about is this. The inverse element of addition. So any two numbers that are equally distant from 0 that are added together, the answer will always become 0. So what it's basically saying that if I have numbers that are a positive and a negative, so both sides, there will be 0. So if I have negative 3 right here, which should have a negative sign, negative 3, and here's positive 3. From negative 3 to 0 is 1, 2, 3. From 3 to 0 is 1, 2, 3. Therefore, when I add the two, it's going to become 0. If I do that with negative 2 and positive 2, I go 1, 2, that is add by 0, and 1, 2, that subtract by 0. So therefore, it's 0. So in more algebra explanations, or in more versions of algebra, sometimes you get x, negative x, then we have to add that by x. That equals just 0, because x minus x is just 0. If I had x plus minus x, that would still equal 0. So let's learn about the next thing we gotta learn about. And the next thing is absorption elements of multiplication. There's a lot of zeros in this. So here's another idea. Any number that's multiplied by 0 is always going to equal 0. That's what we explained in this video right here when we talked about the factors and how many kids get things incorrect on the fact fluencies. But where will we see this in algebra? If you go back to here, and if you go under this because there's an actual second page, look! What we have to do is you see this problem right here? This problem is our algebra problem. And what we have to do is simplify it out. So what it's basically saying is negative z plus z is multiplied by y plus x times 2. You can't solve it because there's no equal sign. But here's what happens. When we use the inverse element of addition with this, we did see that negative z plus z is going to become 0. So 0 is going to be multiplied by y plus x in parentheses times 2. We can rearrange the problem and say 0 times 2 will become 0. So when we do 0 times y plus x, that is going to be one of the last steps. But we're not done yet, because we still have one more thing to do. Absorbing elements of multiplication. Any number times 0 always equals 0. Therefore, if I do the distributive property with 0 times y and 0 times x, it completely destroys everything on the field, making our result as 0, nothing. So that explains the inverse element of addition and the absorbing element of multiplication. Thank you for watching Top Opinion Lines Math Industry. Like and subscribe.